Hi guys, great. Welcome back. Thank you for downloading the assets that are required for the Ozio Authentic Sushi website and making sure that you have the proper apps installed, Photoshop and brackets, and now we're ready to continue to make our web page. To begin with brackets, I'm going to create a new folder on the desktop. In this new folder, I'm going to title Ozio. I tend to do all my labels for files and folders in lowercase because that just helps going forward, so I don't have to remember whether files have upper or lowercase in it. I just know that it's lowercase. Inside this Ozio website folder, I'm going to create a few more folders, and this just helps with organization. So I'm going to open up my Ozio folder on the desktop, and inside this folder I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it _working. Inside this folder, I'm just going to include all the assets that I'm working with that aren't actually going to be used in the final website. So therefore, I'm going to drag the fonts folder and my Photoshop document inside the working folder because I'm just using these as assets. Next folder I'm going to create is CSS. And again, all lowercase. And that's just going to house my CSS files. The third folder I'm going to create is called images. This folder is going to contain any of the images, the JPEGs, the GIF, the PNG, the SVG files that I create for this web page. All right, with the bare bones of my folder structure created, I'm now going to switch over to brackets, create the HTML file, the index.html file, as well as a style.css file for my CSS file. When I launch brackets, by default it shows me all the files of getting started with brackets. I want to replace everything here with my Ozio files. And the easiest way to do that, so I don't get confused between which files are which, is simply drag the Ozio folder into brackets and let go. It replaces all of the getting started, that's a default with brackets, and gives me my Ozio folder and everything inside here. If there's a triangle, it means it's a folder. But what I'm missing is I'm missing two files, my index.html file and my style.css. So in the gray bar on the left-hand side of brackets, I'm going to right-click and choose New File from the contextual menu. And I'm going to name index.html, all in lowercase. I'm going to right-click on the CSS folder. I'm going to choose from the contextual menu, a new file, and label it style.css. Again, all lowercase. Now I've got my two files that I need to work on. My index file, I'm simply going to code out the basics of an HTML page. With the basics of my HTML file created, I want to make sure I add the link from the HTML file to the CSS file to make sure that all of my styles in defining how the website looks will be connected. So after the title tag, I'm simply going to open the angle bracket and add my link to my CSS folder to the style.css. Great, now I've connected the HTML file to the CSS. I can start taking a look at what I actually need to code. I'm going to go back into Photoshop here, and in this video I just want to take a look at creating the header area, which surrounds the logo and the navigation. In the following videos I'll create the hero image area and the featured area. So for this area, I know that a default web size I need for my website is going to be 1000 pixels. So in general, when I start any website, I'm going to create a div for a dividing area inside my web layout. And that dividing area is going to have a title of wrapper. So back inside brackets, this div ID, dividing area, with an ID because this only happens once on the page, a wrapper. This wrapper is going to define the width of my web page. As we start coding, it can get really complicated. So I want to make sure I put some HTML comments in here. Just let me know that the wrapper ends with this closing div tag. All right, there's my wrapper. Once I create a div tag, I want to go and try and style it. So I'm going to go to my style tags, and right now there is absolutely nothing in the style tags. So some things I do need to do before I start is I want to go to Google and grab the fonts that I'm going to use, the web fonts, as well as create a simple CSS reset rule, and then I'll create the rule for the wrapper. I'm going to launch Chrome and go to fonts.google.com. And when I'm here, I'm going to search for Titanium Web. And I'm going to add this to the collection of fonts that I want to download. I'm going to search for the other font, Squatta 1. And here it is here. And I'm simply going to click the red plus icon as well. And now I've got both Squatta 1 and Titanium Web. I'm going to go to the Customize feature because I'm actually choosing this for web and not for print, and I can actually choose the weights that I want. In Customize from Google Fonts, I can choose Squatta 1, and it only has one weight of 400, so I definitely want to make sure that that's checkmarked. For the Titanium Web, I see that regular 400 weight is already selected. I'm also going to choose bold. I don't think I need any of the others right now, so just regular and bold for the Titanium Web, and I've got all three weights selected. I definitely want to click on the embed option now, and I want to make sure this is going in the CSS. Generally, whenever I see angled brackets, I think that it's HTML, and I want to add the fonts inside my CSS file, so I'm going to choose the @import option. When I click the @import option, I have the ability to highlight the @ symbol all the way to the semicolon, and this is going to copy the link to Google Fonts so that my CSS style sheet is now connected to the Google Fonts website, making sure it's got Squatta 1 and Titanium Web, weight 400 and 700. I can copy that and simply paste that into brackets. Now I've connected the two. Another thing I want to do is I actually want to go back to Google Fonts, and they have the font family property and values here. I'm going to copy both of those and paste those into my CSS file as well. And I've just added a comment inside CSS, so this is hidden because I just want to be able to copy and paste those as we go along as needed, as opposed to going back to Google Fonts and copying and pasting multiple times. Great, so I've got the fonts imported. The next thing I want to do is create a CSS reset rule. So I'm simply going to start with the *Shift 8, and that asterisk says this applies to everything in the web browser or in the web code. So I'm going to have curly brackets there, and there's three things I want to set as a default. Again, just a really simple reset. And I'm going to set the margins to 0, the padding to 0, and then box size I'm going to change as well. Margin 0, padding 0, and this removes all the margin and padding, the defaults that are set up by every web browser, and sets it to 0, so I can control how much margin and padding I want on each individual image. But by default it'll be set to 0 now. And I've got box sizing, border box. And this is the third property and value I want to change. And this again, box sizing, border dash box, means that if I add padding to any element, it won't change the width and the height of the element displaying inside the web browser. It just makes life a little easier for you. Great. So those are some of the default things I will have in a CSS file. Below that, we created a wrapper rule inside the HTML file, and now I want to use my CSS rules to style that. So I'm going to start with a hashtag, because in HTML we called it an ID, and in CSS we need to refer to it as a hashtag. So hashtag wrapper. And because this is a box, there's a few things I want to do to this. I definitely want to give it a width. And the width is going to be 1000 pixels. I know this because that's the width of my Photoshop document. I'm going to add a minimum height just so that we can see it and make sure that this is displaying correctly. And I'm just going to choose a number of 200 pixels. And I'm going to add a background color, and this is just a property and value that I will delete afterwards. I just want to see it working in the page to make sure everything is displaying properly, make sure my CSS is connected to my HTML. So with the wrapper rule created, the reset rule, and the fonts added, I'm going to click back on my HTML file, and in brackets click on the lightning bolt on the right hand side, and this will launch Chrome in the developer view, and I should see a red box that's 1000 pixels wide, and I do, 200 pixels tall. Fantastic. By default, when you set any code or div boxes or what have you inside HTML, everything tends to float to the left of the web browser. I want to make sure that this website floats in the middle of the web browser. So I can go back to CSS, inside brackets my style.css, and in the wrapper rule, this is where I'm going to change the margin for the wrapper. I'm simply going to type in margin. I want 0 for the top, auto for the right, 0 for the bottom, and auto for the left. And what this does is it says give 0 spacing for the top and bottom, and however wide the browser is, you figure out the centering for this. So now when I go back to my browser, I should be able to see the red box center inside the web browser, and it does. Perfect. I now no longer need to see the red background because I know it's doing what I want it to do. So I can simply come triple click and delete that background color. All right, we're on our way. Come back to the next video and we'll take a look at the header, the logo, and the navigation.